I think give it about 30 seconds, let people trickle in real quick. We'll go ahead and get started, and others that have RSVP'd can always come in late, and that's fine. Welcome, everybody who is here and who is watching this. I'm Caleb Coates. I'm Program Director for Project Play Colorado. Many of you are familiar with Project Play, the national body, and so this is our statewide project. We're working on just increasing participation for kids in youth sports across the state of Colorado. And so part of that is providing learning opportunities for administrators, coaches, anybody who works with youth, alongside youth, parents, anybody, just to kind of move the needle on just parent education, things like today's topic of ACL injury and prevention. So this is one of our steps in order to just be a resource for people. So, you can come to us for information, for research. We can talk more about that at a different time. But today we do want to get moving on the content for the day. We're very excited to have people join us today. I'm going to introduce Christina Hickson from UCHealth. She's been an integral part of our executive team as we've gotten Project Play Colorado off the ground. So Christina, I'm going to toss it to you.
Great, thanks, Caleb. Hi, I'm Christina Hickson with UCHealth. And UCHealth is a founding partner of Project Play Colorado. So we're very excited to be a part of this discussion today and looking forward to participating in additional conversations on this topic in the future. I'm going to also introduce Mike Allen. Mike, I want to, if you.
Hey, good morning, Mike Allen. I'm Senior Director for Orthopedics, Rehab, and Spine for UCHealth. I oversee operations at our Stedman Hawkins Orthopedic Center down in South Denver. And I also have a role overseeing rehab across the UCHealth system. My background is in physical therapy and athletic training, so this topic is near and dear to me. Worked with a number of athletes over the years and seen the highs and lows and the struggles that athletes have when it's challenging to get when it's challenging to return to sport, seeing the joy when they get back on the field and all the struggles in between. And so we're really excited to be a part of this coalition and look forward to the conversation today.
All right, thank you both. I can't speak highly enough of UCHealth and their willingness to engage in this topic and many others, and just helping move the work of Project Play Colorado forward. So we're very happy to have you join us today. So just some quick logistics for today. We are recording this so we can share it out after the case to everybody who has RSVP'd, and we'll be using portions of this in a variety of different ways. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A function. We will be checking it throughout. We're going to hold Q&A at the end of the session so that we'll have time to answer questions directly from you. If there's something that really pops off the page, we might answer in between, but I don't want to interrupt the presentation. So we'll probably keep those till the end, but please don't hesitate to put them in. You don't have to wait till the end. Just as it comes to mind, just put in a question and we will get to it. So we are going to get moving today. I'm really excited about this conversation and the people that we have joining us for this portion. I'm going to introduce Vince Minjares, who I've known for, a few years now, even before your time with Project Play. Vince is maybe the most interesting person on this call. I think you'll really enjoy hearing from him today. Vince is going to give himself an introduction for what he has done and where he's at and the things that he's working on. But we appreciate you joining us today from the Project Play team, and particularly here talking about your work with the ACL Coalition. And so Vince, welcome, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, Caleb. I don't know about the most interesting person label, but I appreciate the flattery. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Vince Minjares, Project Program Manager with Aspen Institute Sports and Society. I lead our coaching and school sport portfolios. Today, we're talking about ACL injury and some of the work we've been doing to try to really advance this issue, obviously with the aim of keeping athletes safe and healthy and on the field. I'm going to share my screen very quickly because we have A nice sort of session planned here. That's going to include an array of different things, including talking to an athlete who has experienced the injury directly, and then walking through obviously the data and the research on where we can go and what actions we can take as a sector. I will sort of foreground this by saying that the impetus here is the ACL Pledge, which is a national campaign to raise awareness and inspire action on the crisis of ACL injury. The ACL Pledge comes from the work of the National ACL Injury Coalition, which is a collective of leading organizations, sports injury experts, healthcare providers, et cetera, who have come together to really kind of collectively spread knowledge, guide implementation, and just generally raise awareness for change. I will say that the work here is sobering. And I'm going to share a little data here to kind of foreground our conversation today. First being that the injury is growing, and our analysis of athletic trainer medical injury reporting, thanks to our friends at Daedalus and the High School Rio study, showing a 26% increase in the last 15 years, over a 15-year period, effectively in high school athletes. And you can kind of see that over this time period, there's been a pretty up and to the right curve here happening, or line, I should say, happening for boys and girls. I know we're going to talk a lot about girls today and the injury with girls, but it is not exclusively a girls injury. This is really more of a cutting and landing sports injury, if we're being honest, with some exceptions, ski and snowboarding being one. But ultimately, this injury is growing. It's not stopping, and it's been growing. And depending on who you talk to, some will say it's been growing for 30 years, not just the last 15. And I think those of us who are on the call probably have direct connections to many folks that we know who've had a pretty serious ACL injury or more, and maybe a rash of them in a short period of time. And I would say, feel free as we go through today to share those experiences. Maybe drop a line in the chat. Have you seen recent injuries? Have you seen a rash of them? Has the club that you've had, experienced many? Because that is happening often, all the time. In terms of some specifics, though, again, kind of thinking about it from a gender perspective, we are seeing a larger growth in the girls athlete population, particularly, that 26% number, 32% is girls. So girls have a higher growth rate compared to boys, but boys is still growing. And in particular, certain sports are showing an especially dramatic rise. Girls lacrosse being the sport that has seen the greatest growth. I mean, that number is really crazy to look at still. I mean, I've seen it so many times. When you think about the effect of this injury, I think what we like to say is that it is life-changing and career-threatening, and we mean that in every sense of the word. When you suffer an ACL tear, particularly a full tear of your ACL, you typically need surgery. It's a year recovery or more. We've actually seen recently that the return to play time, which is different from the injury recovery time, it can be as much as 17 months or longer. Think about what that does to a young person who's away from their sport that they love, that they played their whole life. The social effects of depressive symptoms, anxiety, social isolation. There's a financial effect of this injury. Surgery is not cheap, and someone has to pay for it. And while insurance can and usually does cover the cost of surgery and some physical therapy, we do see that the extended physical therapy required for return to play is often borne by families directly. So savings or your own insurance. And so that creates a whole equity challenge there. I think it would be great if even that process produced just a perfect return. But we see that even if you recover from your injury, go through physical therapy, the challenge becomes, are you actually in a physical and psychological position to return to the competitive sport that you played at the level you were before? And we are seeing that many don't. And I think when you start thinking about the long-term consequences of the injury, not only do many not return to sport, but many also experience this osteoarthritis risk which is basically within 20 years, most who suffer this injury are going to have quite serious osteoarthritis in their knee, and many have even greater risk of what's called end-stage osteoarthritis, which is typically requires a knee replacement. So I know it's not the most exciting thing to talk about, but it's serious and it is important, and it's something that we need to take action on. It's an issue whose time has come. There's a lot of reasons why this injury continues to perpetuate, and we'll talk about it today. But I'm just thankful to Project Play Colorado and UCHealth and the many who are on this call to dive into it with us today and start thinking about action, which is going to be the focus here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I think that's a nice setup here for a conversation that we are going to have with Paige Hill. And I'd like to introduce Paige. Paige is a junior at the University of Northern Colorado. She is studying sport and exercise science, and she is a defender on the women's soccer team. The thing to know about Paige is that she has suffered not one, but two ACL injuries. Thanks, Paige. She is graciously going to share some of her story with us, which I know means being vulnerable. And thank you for being willing to jump on this call, Paige.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I'm super excited to be here and be part of this program. So excited to answer any questions everyone has today.
Yeah, so what we'll do here is spend just maybe about 10 minutes talking with Paige, and really, I think the setup here, probably just for the audience to help understand context, Paige, is can you maybe just talk a little bit about like where you grew up, kind of sports you played growing up, a little bit of your kind of journey into competitive sport and how you even got to Northern Colorado.
Sure, yeah. So as been said, I am in Greeley, Colorado right now. I actually grew up in Greeley, so I decided to stay close to home for college. But I played a bunch of different sports growing up. Soccer and basketball were my main two that I stuck with in high school. Soccer was my first love and definitely my priority sport growing up, but I always was involved in other sports. So I also played softball and ran track and cross country in middle school as well. So I've been playing sports as long as I can remember, and am a huge proponent of that multi-sport participation as well.
And Paige, I mean, really, we're here to obviously to talk about an injury. So, give us a sense of, your injuries. How did they happen? What was maybe even the situation that they happened? Where were you playing? Who were you with? What was the event? And what do you remember from it?
Yeah. So tearing both has been the better part of 3 years, so I'll try and keep it short and simple. But I tore my first ACL actually at an ID camp in Colorado Springs in July of 2022, which was about a month before I started my senior year of high school. I was just going into a routine tackle that I've made probably 1,000 times before and hyperextended my knee and felt a pop, just knew something wasn't right immediately. But prior to that, I'd never had a serious injury. I don't think I'd ever missed a game or more than a week of practice unless it was for illness. So we came home, did the MRI, did all the things, got my diagnosis, which was absolutely heartbreaking. I think the first one particularly was a lot harder because it was a month before I started my senior year. So all the things that I wanted to do my senior year kind of went out the window. So I had surgery about a month later in August, and then most of my senior year was comprised of rehab. I was getting checked out of class to go to PT appointments and drive down to Denver to have checkups. So I didn't get to play my last season of basketball, obviously, which I always think it's crazy because I didn't know that my last basketball game was going to be my last basketball game, but just something crazy to think about. And then, yeah, even little stuff like powder puff football, I wasn't able to do, which is such a minor thing, but the ACL is just such a debilitating injury because not only does it take you out of your sport, but you just have no control over your own body. And as someone who's very active, likes to hike, likes to go to concerts and do all that fun stuff, I just had no control. And it's definitely the most helpless that I've ever felt, I think is the best way to put it. But I went through about 8.5 months of rehab. I ended up playing, I think, the last 5 or 6 games of my senior soccer season, which was definitely early. Usually they recommend that like 9 to 12 months for recovery, but I couldn't miss I'd been playing with most of the girls on that team since I was 4. So I just needed to get a couple more games in. So did that. I played a position I'd never played before in my life. I was playing forward. So it was definitely just different, but I'm so grateful that I was able to do it. And then I got to UNC for preseason in August, was still wearing the brace. I guess I would have been about a year out of surgery at that point. Just wasn't feeling 100%. And obviously the transition from high school to college is difficult anyways. So not being 100% was hard. And I did end up redshirting that fall. So didn't see any action that year. And then our competition season's in the fall, but we do play scrimmages and other games in the spring just for development and stuff like that. So we came back in January. I was finally feeling really good, almost back to normal. I was about a month from getting my brace off, which was super exciting. And then we went over to indoor tournament at CSU, and I got subbed in for about 30 seconds and tore my other one. So it's back to square one. Yeah, obviously it was very difficult the second time, but I think the second one was easier because I kind of knew what to expect. And I will say I had an amazing care team. I loved my physical therapist. I loved my surgeon. So that made it a lot easier. But yeah, rehabbed for a year that time. I played last spring with the brace on and got through healthy. And then this summer I finally was able to get out of my brace. So this fall is truly the first time in like 3 years that I've been healthy and finally feel back to normal. I wouldn't say I'm the same player that I was before I got hurt. I play differently now, but I do feel healthy and I think I'm playing the best soccer I have in a while. So I'm grateful to be here now, but it's been a long haul.
Wow. I mean, I wish you weren't the first to say that almost sort of like the first time back from an injury, you suffered another one. Quick question, were they the same knee or were they different knees?
No, I tore one of each, yeah. And they were both non-contact injuries as well. So
Right. And so the second one, what was the kind of situation? Were you playing defense, attacking? Were you landing from a jump? Like, what was the situation?
it was kind of weird. I was still wearing my brace at the time on my left knee, obviously, and I'm just naturally prone to hyperextension in both knees.
Mm,
So as I remember it, and it's all a little fuzzy, but
I know,
I
I'm sure.
was, yeah, guarding a girl pretty close, like from behind, and we both stepped to the same ball, and she barely touched me. I still think it was a non-contact injury, but just kind of threw me off balance, and I literally just landed wrong on my right foot, and I think my knee kind of went inwards, and felt the pop. I knew what it was that time, so yeah.
And we're going to talk about the mechanism of the injury a little bit. But we have a couple really great questions from Linda. Thanks, Linda, for sharing. One in particular that I think is relevant here. She's asking about, from you, Paige, the layers of support from coaches, trainers, and teammates. So how much interaction did you have with these groups post-surgery, during PT, and any feelings of isolation from the team?
Yeah, so each one was a little bit different, obviously, because in high school, I was rehabbing kind of up to our soccer season. So I would see my teammates at school, but I wasn't necessarily around it all the time. Um, but I truly did have a great support system. I went to a doctor in Denver actually for my surgery, and I only saw him. It was like once every 3 months, I think, were the checkups, and he was awesome, but just wasn't as involved with him. I think my PTs are where I had the most support and involvement. So I saw one PT for the first 3 to 4 months, and then I transitioned to like a return to play bridge program that was more functional training. So, but they all worked very closely together. Everyone was updated with what was going on, and they asked how I was feeling, if things were going well. They knew when to push and when to relax a little bit. So they were awesome. And then when I got to UNC, I will say, I think it's a universal thing, but I don't think the collegiate system knows exactly what to do with ACL injuries yet.
Interesting.
And obviously, my experience was a little different because I'd already torn an ACL before. So when I tore my second one, I decided to go back to all the people that I'd been with before just because I was comfortable with them. I knew that they were going to get me where I needed to be. So I went back to all my outside PTs. I didn't do a ton of rehab through UNC, but it definitely made it harder. Our athletic trainer was, I think, just confused about how to work with outside people. So I was double dipping. Last fall I was getting up at 5:30 and going to rehab, going to 2-a-day practices for 4 hours, and then doing rehab at UNC. So it was a lot. It was definitely probably one of the harder things I've ever done. And then our coaches, they were nice, but again, I don't think they've had a ton of training on it. So they didn't really know how to integrate, especially with that return to play thing. Like when we came back, they weren't really sure how to throw us back into practice. So there was a lot of disconnect, I will say, as I was going through the second rehab. And my teammates have always been great. I do have a great support system as far as teammates and family and friends go.
I guess, it's a nice setup for, I think, kind of the sort of like long-term impact of this injury. And I think it's great to hear you say that, you feel like you're playing great soccer, you've been able to recover, maybe you play a little bit differently now. One of the things about your kind of journey has been your academic interest. Now we've had a call before. You've mentioned that, you're even doing a research project for your studies right now on this. You've got a real interest in the preventative side of this. Can you talk a little bit about kind of like where you're at now, kind of just as a person in terms of your kind of passion for this issue, the things you really care about now, and what you're hoping to learn through maybe even your research project?
Sure. Yeah. I will say, as awful as it was to go through, I am grateful for parts of the ACL process because it helps me take a step back and realize that soccer is not the end all be all, and it's going to go away at some point. And I also got to see an inside perspective of the medical system, which I always knew I wanted to do something in healthcare, but I didn't know exactly what that was going to be. All through high school, I thought I wanted to do PT, and then I got to go through PT and saw that maybe that's not what I wanted to do. So
Okay.
I switched my path to pre-med, and I'm still exploring some options there, but I know that I want to, regardless of what I end up specializing in or anything like that, I will definitely have a lifelong passion and interest for ACL injury. So I am doing my senior thesis on ACL prevention in women's collegiate soccer. So I'll be doing that next spring and fall. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's just an injury that you can't explain to people unless they've gone through it. But people don't really buy into it until they've gone through it either. So just getting as much awareness out there as possible is kind of my goal. And going forward is I'd love to stay involved with, the pledge and coalition and anything that I can do to help with that.
Do you think that there's what's the like feeling in girls soccer right now and women's soccer like about this injury? Like I think we're hearing so much. I feel like every week, every month, sometimes even more, we hear about more injuries happening. We hear about the number in the English Premier League, and we see NWSL players. And what do you think people, like athletes, are feeling about it? Like that it's inevitable, that there's nothing they can do? Like, are people scared? Like, what's the mindset, I guess, around it among current players, would you say?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at in my survey, but just among our team, I know that like it's an epidemic is what we've said. And we've had 6 girls on our team tear theirs in the time that I've been here. So it happens way too much. And I do know after every injury that we've had here, it's just such a sinking feeling. It was not funny, but I actually had 2 very, very close friends of mine. One of them tore their ACL 2 weeks before I tore mine, and then my best friend and I tore ours on the same day at
Oh my
CSU.
gosh.
So it was, can't make it up. But um, just on our team, it's a very real issue, and that's why I'm kind of interested to see if that's universal among all programs or just what that feeling is there. I don't think they think it's inevitable, but it's definitely a concern, especially at such a high level. It's just a high risk sport.
Yeah. Well, I hope you can stay on the call, particularly when we get to the Q&A section. I'm going to do a little presentation here, but I think some questions from the audience. I know you'll have some thoughts, as well. So thanks, Paige, for sharing your story. I think it's really great to get the voice of, to get your voice and to get the voice of an athlete who's obviously experienced it directly. So thanks for taking some time here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. With that, I'm going to segue back, and thanks again, Paige, for sharing. I'm going to now kind of walk through about 15, 20 minutes of really the kind of the synthesis of what's happening from a coalition perspective. I know there's going to be some questions, so again, throw them into the chat. But the opportunity here is to walk through some of the things that were alluded to in the conversation with Paige, some things that we've learned through our work as a coalition. One thing to sort of know is that, I kind of wanted to mention this earlier, but as we jumped into the call with Paige, you know, this study I think I find striking, which was a 2019 study it's a European study of female soccer athletes, and effectively 3 out of 5 are going to quit within 2 years of suffering an ACL injury, and it's really due to this lack of trust in the knee and the fear of re-injury. And once you get one injury, you are more likely to get another, and this sort of can create this vicious cycle. I know that as we talk about kind of risk factors and sort of like what's happening, there's going to be some conversation here around the many different potential risk factors that are involved. And we are going to lean mainly into one area, but I want to just say this off the top, that this is a really complex injury. There are a lot of different potential risk factors, but from a public health perspective, what we have really championed is a focus on the modifiable risk factors that have a large base of academic research evidence behind them. And as I'll sort of articulate, that's going to be something called neuromuscular training. But I don't want to sort of dismiss things like hormones or turf fields. I know there's a comment around shoe design. These things are all being investigated, and rightfully so. They should all be investigated. But the core research that we've leaned into has been around neuromuscular training, and ultimately this is our thesis as a coalition. Obviously the injuries are rising. Females and cutting and landing sports are most at risk. Neuromuscular training is the natural starting point for talking about solutions, because we've got 3 decades of research behind simple exercises that have been proven to reduce risk. And the dosage is not that intense. We're talking about 10 to 15 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week, starting in the preseason and continuing in season. I'll explain more of that in a second. The challenge that we've had historically is that people just don't do these exercises, if we're being honest. It's actually really disturbing. But let me sort of set that up. So we've talked about female and cutting. Here's the data on the sports themselves. So again, from our high school Rio data, girls soccer has and continues to have the highest rate of injury. You can see that the highest highest risk sports are all cutting and landing sports: soccer, basketball, lacrosse, football being the main sports, girls being higher than boys. Football is an interesting kind of piece here because this is tackle football, so we get a large number of contact injuries in tackle football. So you can see, that these other sports are having a higher proportion of non-contact ACL injuries than football. Other sports like wrestling and baseball do have them, but just simply not at the same rate. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do something, but we are seeing that the most vulnerable sports are these ones. In terms of the mechanism, we've been talking a little bit about non-contact versus contact. And what do we mean by that? We mean an injury that happens when you are simply performing a regular, common movement, and someone hasn't made contact within you that produces the valgus that we see with the injury. And I'm going to share with you a video of an injury happening here. So just fair warning for those who might be a little bit triggered by an injury. This is a player's going to come in here from the left side. She's in black with ginger hair. She's going to plant her left leg, and you're going to see it here. On that plant, that knee caves in. This sort of phenomenon of the knee caving in is something we call dynamic valgus, which, your ACL injury kind of runs across the front of your knee. And when you have that downward pressure, it snaps. And we see it most commonly in everyday planting, stopping, and landing situations. In that case, there's been some interesting work on defenders. We do see a slight increase in soccer among defensive situations where you're having to react to an offensive player. And it's that ability to sort of like read and react in the moment under control that tends to produce a high degree of force, and our body's ability to handle that force is really the key issue here. And it's interesting because this is an image that we got from our friends at HSS of some screening that has been happening of young athletes. And this is a young man performing a single leg squat. And you can kind of see in a simple squat, this is not a landing, this is not a dynamic movement, this is a static movement, that knee just caving in as an example of a lack of what we call neuromuscular control. The presence of this knee caving in is usually identified as a potential risk factor for an ACL injury. It doesn't guarantee that it's going to happen, but it is often common in screenings. And it is something that concerns us. And this data that you see on the right here is data representing the presence of valgus, that knee caving in, on these static movements in screening of high school athletes done by our friends at HSS. So what we're seeing here is 88% of young people who are being screened have their knee caving in on a single leg squat on the left leg, a single leg squat on the right leg, and 79% have it when they load to jump up, and 74 have it when they land from a jump. So basically, this is happening in most everyone. Now, keep in mind, this is a screening of PE students, many of whom are playing sports, but it's very, very common, and it's concerning. Again, it's not a guarantee that you will tear your ACL, but it is a risk factor. When we think about the action, then we think mainly about neuromuscular training as the core intervention. So what do we mean by neuromuscular training? Well, there was a recent meta-analysis of injury prevention programs that really synthesized effective programs that have been good at reducing injury. Greg Meyer, who is one of the co-authors on the study, is part of our coalition, which was, we call this the Petusic scale. I don't know if that's the technical term. But when we think about neuromuscular training, we're thinking about quite common exercises. This scale, these points represent the value of each item in producing a total number of points that represents the quality of the program. So if you've got lunges in your program, that's a point. Hamstring exercises, that's a point. Heel and calf raises, that's a point, and so on. I will flag that landing stabilization exercises, where there's some component of landing and holding and stabilizing, are really the key items here. But you can see that we like to think of these as programs that address two things: lower body strength and control. The strengthening exercises are focused on the posterior chain. So it's strengthening the hamstring, the calves, the sort of backside of your body, which are important for stopping, landing, and cutting. So the idea here is if we know that non-contact ACL injuries are happening in situations that require a really good ability to stop and land under control, we need to strengthen our athletes' ability to execute those movements by improving their strength and training their body to respond to these situations. So these programs tend to include lots of landing stabilization, landing on 2 feet, landing on 1 foot, jumping to the side, jumping forward, jumping backwards. These kind of plyometric exercises work, but so do stopping exercises. Anything that helps your body stop is really good. We obviously also have a big focus on middle and high school athletes. We do not see the same rate of injury in elementary age athletes, which we understand as a function of the body's changes with puberty. Older athletes are more muscular, they have more body mass, and that has a relationship to the intensity of the ground contact and impact. So we see a higher rate of injury in older athletes compared to younger. Generally speaking, the recommendation is middle school and upwards executing neuromuscular training programs, and not just doing them one time. You got to start in the preseason, continue in season. And if I'm being honest, my general recommendation is to do it year round if I'm in a cutting and landing sport. But if I'm a team executing a program, I want the players doing it in the preseason, continuing in the in-season, and that I have a person on site who is trained in ACL injury prevention, meaning they understand everything I've just explained, the risk factors, and they can point to guiding the movements during these programs to make sure that they are executed correctly. For instance, reminding players to land with their knees over their toes, or in their knees in line with their toes, and not letting their knee cave in, which is often a point of a cueing that we like to see. Okay, so when you think about all this work, you're like, man, like this seems so simple. And really it is simple. And it's been around since the early 90s. The earliest programs were the Santa Monica PEP program, developed by our friends Holly Silvers Grinelli, Bert Mandelbaum, and others on the West Coast. The recommendation was 30 to 60 minutes a week across 2 or 3 days a week. There's a huge effect here on injury prevention. We've seen that when you execute these kinds of programs consistently, reduction in ACL injury by as much as 88%. Some of the meta studies have shown 50% reduction in ACL injury. So effectively, we can cut our ACL injuries in half, we believe, with consistent adoption of these programs. We also see fewer injuries generally, particularly lower body musculoskeletal injuries like knee sprains, ankle sprains. Obviously, there is a long-term physical mobility effect. And I think the thing that's interesting is you become a better athlete, right? If you're stopping better and you're more under control, you can get in and out of cuts better. So we do see improvements in your ability to accelerate, decelerate, and obviously lower limb strength. The challenge, and this is where we need all of you, is this thing we call the implementation problem. We just aren't doing these exercises, even though we've had this research. There are hundreds of studies demonstrating their efficacy, different ages, levels. We don't do these exercises, and there are exceptions for sure. But when you ask coaches why they don't do them, or when they do or do not do them, the barriers that come up are barriers that we believe are improvable and addressable. So one is coaches' lack of confidence in the program, or their knowledge of the program and their ability to implement it. The main one we hear is lack of time. So coaches saying, we don't have time for this. Sorry, we've got too many other things to do. We see a cultural phenomenon of a lack of importance placed on injury prevention in the club or the program. There is a conversation about the design of some of these programs, and I'll talk about that in a second. There is a conversation around motivation from the athletes, and there is a conversation around the ability to mix and match some of the programs. And I think we've seen enough innovation in the design of programs to start to address many of these questions, but we need a level of engagement with the coaches directly. And you can see on the right, the facilitators that produce implementation are coaches' knowledge of certainly the injury, their knowledge of programs, certainly anything that motivates or engages or incentivizes people to do them, easy integration and access to the programs, and some degree of individual progression and individualization, which gets us to the pledge, because ultimately, what is the pledge asking people to do? It's understand the crisis, raise awareness in your community, and most importantly, make neuromuscular training a priority. This is what we've been driving towards, and it happens in a few ways. One is training courses. So there are free, very effective online courses that exist today. The most obvious one, I would say, is the NFHS course on ACL injury prevention that is online on NFHS Learn. It is free. It takes 30 minutes. It is very good at giving you a high-level introduction to the injury in probably more detail than I've even given today. USYS University, and USYS is a partner of ours in the coalition, has a free 30-minute online course through their USYS University. We're also big fans of in-person workshops. This is an example of one that the New York Liberty ran about 10 years ago. The efficacy is here. I'm not going to go through all this, but basically safe to say that after you complete these trainings, you're way more likely to implement, and at 3 months afterwards, you're way more likely to have to continue implementing. This is from the NFHS Learn course. So coaches who take this course, it really helps them implement neuromuscular training. I will say that the biggest issue and the question that we get most often is, well, what programs and exercises should I do? And to be honest with you, this is a little bit of choose your own adventure. You've got to know what will work in your environment. So I'm going to walk through a few of the different ways that it could be implemented, just for specificity. I think on one hand, warm up tends to be the place that most injury prevention researchers jump to. It's viewed as a place where you can sort of quite easily and simply implement without disrupting what you normally do. That being said, we get a ton of pushback from coaches who don't want to change up their warm-up. So let's, take that with a grain of salt. But if you want to do it as a warm-up, there's a couple ways to do this. Netball Smart, which is netball is a cutting and landing sport played commonly internationally. It's kind of like a combination of basketball and soccer. They've had an ACL injury problem. So the national body in netball in New Zealand, in this case, has created multiple warm-ups. There's a pre-practice warm-up and there's a pre-competition warm-up. There's also a movement skills program. So they sort of offer coaches a range of different warm-ups. One takes 10 to 15 minutes, another takes 5 minutes. The 5-minute one is the pre-match version. The 15-minute one is the pre-practice version. Do the one that you feel most comfortable and that you have time to do. But if you're going to do a minimum thing, do this power version at minimum before your games. The programs are all there. They provide them. They're online. They're free. The Wayland method is interesting because many of you have probably heard of the 11 plus warm-up, and the 11 plus is probably the OG version of these programs. It is it's the most cited, the most published, the most referenced ACL injury prevention program that we have. It is very effective. It gets the job done. It takes 20 minutes. Typically, if you do it all in consecutive fashion, meaning that you do part 1, 2, and 3 continuously. Some people don't want to spend 20 minutes on an ACL injury prevention warm-up. So there's something called the Wayland method, which allows you to do parts 1 and 3 before practice and part 2 after practice, which is the strength portion. These are like core exercises, Nordic hamstring curls, which is what the image shows. This is a nice kind of compromise where it's like, look, we'll take 7 or 10 minutes before. Most of part 1 and 3 is a dynamic. Part 2 is the strength element. So this is a key piece. One of the things that we see though is that, look, can this be something that's done as homework or outside of the warm-up or team environment? And we've seen lots of innovation in this space. So for example, Rip Reps is a new app-based neuromuscular training that can be done at home by an athlete in a self-paced fashion. The cool thing about it is that it can be tracked by coaches and leaders. You enroll your team or your club, and then coaches have the ability to monitor completion of exercises. They can do it at practice, but many encourage them to do it at home. Similarly, the Remain in the Game app, all of these are on our website, by the way. So go to our resources page and you'll find all these programs. Again, free programs. Remain in the Game is more of an S&C style program. Coach designs sets, reps, and time of selected exercises, and athletes can complete them before practice, after practice, sort of anywhere that they want. This is really the sort of like core piece here. And I would say that there's a lot more work that can be done, I think, from an S&C perspective. We've recently partnered with the National Strength and Conditioning Association to explore these conversations around how do we continue to strengthen the integration of ACL injury prevention into S&C. I think this is the next space that we need to get more serious about, is the design of strength and conditioning programs. But what we need are guidance from clubs, national bodies on kind of recommended protocols. We are right now kind of protocol agnostic. Pick the one that works for you, but we would be happy to help you figure out which one potentially works for you. I will say a couple other things here before I finish, and we have some questions. One is there is still an awareness issue. And I really commend the New York Liberty. Last year They did some social media work talking about how they implement neuromuscular training as part of their pre-competition warm-up. So this is an example of images from New York Liberty players, obviously WNBA players who are executing their neuromuscular training through, they've got kettlebells, they've got bands, but a lot of it is hamstring work, a lot of it is single leg balance work. Folks can do a lot. You can host an orientation. You can bring in trusted voices from your community to amplify the work. You can distribute materials, including ours, to get more people thinking about this issue. Really, the messaging piece matters, and we need to get more people messaging and talking about it. So once you have an understanding of the issue, get more people talking about it. I will say that from a structural perspective, we need to start getting creative. So insurance is one place in particular where we think there's real opportunity to get creative on this injury. And the issue here is I think we want to rally the insurance sector in the ways that we can. Players Health has been an awesome partner of ours, and they've been really invested in this issue with us. And one of the things that's happened in New Zealand is ACC, who is the national insurance provider, they funded Netball Smart as an injury prevention program because they want to see fewer surgeries. It's a win-win. If you get fewer surgeries, there's fewer costs associated with it. I think this is one of the places where insurance can be a driver and healthcare can be a driver. In this case, we saw from the Players Health data that knee injuries represented 53% of all total injuries in their data set, with shoulder being very far behind as a very far second. So knee injuries are a big issue for them. And I think we want to continue to work with folks like them. One of the things that they've explored is a credit program where if a program implements neuromuscular training, they can get reductions on their premium. So this is kind of the concept. The concept here would be that if you basically answer yes to do you do neuromuscular training, you get a 2% credit. And if you meet injury thresholds, then you can get an additional 5% credit on your renewal. I think it's a really interesting kind of phenomenon. Sorry, this is going fast. I think it's a really interesting phenomenon that I think needs to continue to be explored. How can we incentivize neuromuscular training through financial credits and discounts? This is something that I think has not really been seriously investigated in the US. It's happening more internationally, I would argue. And as a final piece here, I think that we would just want to share a few kind of calls to action. One is, if you go to our website, you'll find that we have something called a field guide. This walks a club or a program through a process for implementing neuromuscular training. It's based on implementation science. It is, really about figuring out what protocol you want to do, testing that with the team, doing some education and awareness in your club, and then scaling over time to more teams as you figure out what works. My last piece here is please sign the pledge. The pledge is a really, it's a symbolic action to really take action on the issue. We are asking you to lend your voice and join our community and say, hey, you know what? This issue matters to me. We care about it. We want to do it. And we're going to figure out what we can do, whether that's taking you on it, doing more education, hosting conversations, or if you are in a position to drive implementation of neuromuscular training in a specific space, go for it, do it. And we'd love to help you figure out what your program is, but get out there and do it. And follow us online. We've got a ton of resources out there. So I think that's it. And, thanks. That's a lot of talking from me. I know about 12 minutes here left for conversation. Caleb, I know that there's probably some reactions. Maybe you've got some reactions, but happy to respond and take any questions from folks at this point.
Yeah. Actually, I'm wondering if Paige would like to come on. Sheila has asked a question in the QA for you. I figure Paige might be, I don't know, buried in a textbook something, but no, great. But so Sheila asks that, first of all, it's wonderful that you're pursuing your thesis to address an issue that has affected you personally and has great potential for prevention. I'm curious about what you discovered in the literature search, especially as related to female athletes. I believe that overall orthopedic research on females is 10% or less of the collective research base. How robust is the research base for ACL injury prevention in women, and what are the opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't looked at my literature review in a while, but you are correct. I don't know if 10% is the exact number, but there is a very large disparity in research across the ACL world, which is obviously very surprising considering that we know females are generally more prone to that injury. So that was definitely a surprising trend that I saw in my research. There's also not as much research as I thought there would be around soccer in general. And as you said, if there is studies, it's usually focused on men. There are a few really good replicable studies that I'm planning to kind of use as inspiration for my project, but overall, I will say there's quality research out there, but the quantity I don't think necessarily matches how big of an issue I believe at least it is.
I will also just chime in here. I agree broadly with the thesis that that sports science research in particular has historically been done on men, and that is a problem. However, there is a lot of research on ACL injury prevention and women. And in fact, Holly Silvers at the summit this year talked about this very issue. She is a pioneer in the world of ACL injury research. And her argument actually is that we have more injury prevention research on women than we do on men for this injury. And we have lots of really great studies. She's actually had to go the other way to show that actually this is efficacious among men, the injury prevention in ACL. So this is one of the unique little niches where we actually know that neuromuscular training in particular is good for women. I do think, though, we still need more deeper understanding of gender differences and in causes and mechanisms. So I think the conversation around the issues of hormones, cleat design, et cetera, is quite interesting. And Michael, I don't know if maybe we did get a question earlier about shoes and cleat design. Mike, I wonder if Michael, if you have any thoughts or comments about the question about shoes and the like.
Come off camera here. No, I don't know any research specifically offhand regarding cleats. I know there's been extensive research done in the last couple of years looking at artificial turf and the different type of surfaces that are played on. There was one particular NFL stadium that was becoming well known for ACL injuries and the manufacturer of that turf that was associated with that. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I would say a lot of the focus has been on the surface as opposed to the actual cleats, the research that I've seen.
I'm just putting in the chat here also, Sheila, a great study on injury prevention in young female athletes. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis. I think you'll find that fascinating. I agree, Mike. I think that it's an interesting conversation and one that, I know we get a lot of the conversation around shoes and cleats and fields and turfs, and the jury's out. I think the jury's out, even though if you talk to many players, they prefer grass and are worried about the turf. I think that's anecdotal, and I would love more research to really articulate the nuanced findings there. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that this is a great conversation. Would be curious if anyone has any just general comments or reactions, to this. One of the things I think to think about a little bit is what can you do, and what's the next step that you can take? And I think, from our perspective, get as educated as you can, raise awareness as much as you can. And if you are in a position to work with even one athlete to support them in implementing neuromuscular training, do it. Our resources page has a number of programs. There's a number that I didn't even list here. There's the IOC has a Get Set app, which is another free app. And I think part of what our job next is, and Michael and Christina, and I'd love to continue to have this conversation with all of you, but in the state of Colorado, can the state of Colorado kind of take the next step in, a mass movement to really organize around this and reduce risk. And folks like Paige, I'm sure there's many other Pages out there, Paige, who are going through a similar thing who we can bring into this conversation and rally the sector.
And also to kind of, I don't know, give a challenge somewhere too in this, and because Vince, you and I have talked about like implementation is really, I think that's the missing piece. And so like, I think everybody can see the data. It's staggering. I mean, you see the numbers. I mean, when you, especially that conversation about where girls and women fit into the research, like at some point, because the numbers are so staggering, it had to be would have been considered malpractice to not apply more research to it, just because the numbers they're jarring every time you look at them, right? And so, but you and I have talked about the fact that implementation, it's got to come from top down. And so, and this is kind of to talk to the athletic directors or the program directors. Like an athlete can care about it, a coach can care about it, a parent can care about it, but really it has to become part of a program element. And so, and I think that's one thing that we want to talk about is like, how do we get the leadership, the people in charge of, I come from the school space, like we drive the culture, like we build the program around our philosophy. And so like incorporating specifically ACL care and prevention as part of our culture, I think is a pretty important step. And I think that's kind of, as we talk about where Colorado can lead, like thinking about those ideas for implementation, about how do we get those people engaged to, not just look at numbers and be jarred, but to actually, how do we take action? And it's not, I don't think it's neglect. I think it's just, there's a lot of things on the plate, but we want to empower and encourage people to like give them steps, like actionable steps for how they can start making changes in their programs and trickle it down to all of the coaches and have expectations around that. So I know we don't have a ton of time left. If anybody has any last minute questions, please drop it in the chat. And I know I'll echo Vince's statements. I'm looking forward to follow-up fun conversations where we can talk about Colorado as a whole and just kind of kick around some ideas on and getting that out. And that said, anybody who is watching or watching this in the recording later, like my email address is in all of in the newsletters, and so please reach out if you have ideas, thoughts, and you want to engage in this conversation with me as an individual, or you want to be involved in some deeper work. Then please reach out, because the broader we can build a coalition, the better. It elevates voices. So I don't know, Vince, any final thoughts before we close this out?
No, I think it's been interesting because you talk to folks who and you say like, well, how come you haven't done anything on ACL injury? Like why not? And it's been an interesting kind of like paradox, in part because you will never find anyone saying it's not a serious issue, it doesn't matter, or that we should do something. What I've been finding, certainly in the last 10 years, at least what I've heard and the conversations I've had, because obviously I've been talking about ACL injury for a long time, is that it just sort of keeps getting pushed down the inbox as other fires rise to the top. Right. So if you think about administrators being firefighters, right, who are constantly putting out fires from a health and safety perspective, think about what we've dealt with over the last 10 years. I think 10 years ago, concussion was the thing that we were really focused on taking action on. And then obviously everything that's happened with, safe sport and abuse prevention has become crucial to acting. And then you have the COVID pandemic, right? Which is another health and safety fire that we've got to put out. And so ACL injuries just stayed there. It just continues to happen, right? And we saw spikes post-COVID because you had a whole bunch of kids who were sedentary, not playing. Then they suddenly jump out there, their bodies are deconditioned, and spike in ACL injury. It's kind of leveled a little bit, but still very high and still growing. So when are our administrators going to say, you know what, we are going to stop, not wait for it to become a 4-alarm fire. It's been a 2-alarm fire for decades.
Yeah.
Let's act.
Right. And I think it's observable. I mean, my kid, my youngest son's a freshman in high school, and just completely unrelated. Didn't know we were having this talk today or anything. 2 days ago, he gets in the car and just we talk on the way home. He says, Dad, he said, if every soccer player I know that's a girl like has the scar on their knee. Like, what is going on? Is that it's like his observation as a 14-year-old freshman boy is that it's just observable that he just sees these ACL injury scars just left and right. He's like, is it part of the uniform now? Like, what's going on? So I think you're right. It's been a 2 alarm fire and it's observable. And I think we're at a spot where like action has to be taken. Because I mean, as you know, from Project Play Colorado's standpoint, we want to get kids involved. We want them to play, but it's not just getting them introduced. We have to retain them, which means we have to create safe spaces for them to do so. And we talk about the emotions and a lot of things involved in social emotional learning and health and things like that. But there's the physical component where we have a massive injury issue that we need to address holistically as a nation. And so I think that's where we're at. So as a state, we want to help lead the charge. We want to find ways to implement these things and put them in practice so that Colorado can kind of be the shining beacon that says, look what we've done. This is how we've reduced the numbers and then just provide something that could be scalable and replicable in other places, which I think you've provided a lot of resources today, Ben. So, so to close us out, because it is 11, special thanks, Paige. Thank you for joining us today. You don't have to come back on camera, but it is very powerful to have the experience and voice of youth to join us and to kind of let us center around that and those experiences, because that's why we're here. So thank you for joining us, and best of luck in your studies. We hope you turn it on its head and we get to cite you in future webinars and all the great work that you do in the future. Christina Michael, thank you for joining us from UCHealth. We appreciate your involvement. Look forward to further conversations with you. Everybody who attended, thank you for coming on, and anybody who watches this in a recording, thank you for watching through it, and we hope to engage with all of you sooner. Be on the lookout for anything else from Project Play Colorado as we have other future learning opportunities. I know in January, we're going to talk about the American Development Model. Our friends at the USOPC are going to join us for that. We have a few other topics that we're going to unroll throughout the year and just provide as many opportunities as we can for people to come, learn, and bring back some practices that they can put in action as soon as they go back to their schools or fields or wherever they're going. So with that, thank you, everybody. We are going to sign off, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.